Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at how to set up a closed-loop integration between Cinequeue and ConvertKit so that you can generate and send out personalized videos using ConvertKit. There will be three sections that we'll cover. First, we're going to create custom fields in ConvertKit, set up an automation, and construct an email that will work very well with personalized videos. And then we'll go over to Cinequeue, create a trigger campaign as well as setting up the integration. And finally, we go back to ConvertKit and create a new subscriber to test the end-to-end process. So let's go over to ConvertKit and create our custom fields that we will need for this integration. Over here, when you go click on subscribers and you click on one of the records, then you can see on the bottom, add new field. This is how you create custom fields. We already created a few custom fields in here for this particular demonstration. As we can see, we got Cinequeue campaign ID. This is the ID that is going to come from Cinequeue and it will trigger the automation in ConvertKit. So that's a very important field. The Cinequeue CRN, the Cinequeue requires you to have CRN for each of the records. So we have to have a CRN field. And then we will pass some data over to Cinequeue, and this will be populating one of the customizations. And we also created a PURL field. So this is where the personalized video URL is going to be populated by Cinequeue. And we also need a Cinequeue trigger field, which will trigger the Cinequeue campaign. So let's go over to automations. And as we can see, we already created an automation in here. So let's click on Edit and have a look at how it's being set up. So the first step is how you want your subscribers to enter this automation. So we selected Event and we say that if Cinequeue campaign ID changes to that particular ID, which is the Cinequeue campaign ID, coming from Cinequeue, then send out this particular email. In this particular demonstration, we only have one email in our sequence, but you can add as many emails as you wish. And what I wanted to call out in here is this particular section. So we just used an image. It's a very basic email that we constructed. We're just going to use an image and we have a URL behind this image. And that URL is using one of the custom fields that we created earlier, Cinequeue PURL. And just a reminder, that custom field is going to be populated by Cinequeue via the integration. So this is how we're going to make sure that every single recipient audience member will receive their personalized video URL. So let's go over to Cinequeue and take a look at how to set up a trigger campaign. So we already have a demo ConvertKit campaign set up in here. So what I wanted to call out is the segment, how the segment is being set up. So if the Cinequeue camp trigger custom field in Cinequeue is set to send me ConvertKit demo, then trigger this campaign. So that information is going to come from ConvertKit. So let's have a look at the message. The message has also been built. It's just a very basic personalized video, a few seconds only, and it's a car renewal notice. And we can see that the message has been personalized. So over here, we're going to display the first name of the viewer, and we are also populating the CF temp date 01 custom field in Cinequeue, and that is also going to come from ConvertKit. And let's have a look at the executions, because this is where we can turn this campaign into a trigger campaign by clicking on the schedule and click on make it trigger based. We'll set a date somewhere in the past. Because it's a trigger-based campaign, it doesn't really matter what date you select. As long as it's in the past, you'll be fine. But in some instances, you don't want to trigger the campaign immediately. You might want to just kick it off, say, in a month's time. So obviously, in those cases, you will set the date sometime in the future. And I set the run until far in the future because I don't know when I want to stop this campaign. So basically, this is how you set up a trigger campaign in Cinequeue. Now let's go over to set up the integration. So what we do is click on data and then click on integrations and click on new integrations and find ConvertKit and click on create. This orange circle is indicating that this integration hasn't been configured. So let's click on settings and we can see over here that we need the API key. So let's go over to ConvertKit and go to account settings general. And this is where we can find our API key that we're just going to copy and paste in here. And then we also need the API secret, which is in the same place. We just got to click on show and copy it into Cinequeue and click on test connection. And we can see that the connection is successful. So let's quickly save it. And we can now see that the orange circle changed to green. So it means that there is a successful connection. It doesn't mean that it has been configured properly. So there are two sections in the integration that needs to be configured. One is the get member data, which means Cinequeue is pulling subscriber data from ConvertKit. And the other part is the push member data, which means Cinequeue is pushing some sort of data to ConvertKit for further actions. So let's set up the get member data first. Schedule enable, we need to set that to true. And you can set up on integration, and if for whatever reason you want to pause it, you can just disable the schedule rather than delete the entire integration. And on the time zone, we want to run this Sydney time. And the run at, so what it means is that this schedule by default will run at midnight Sydney time every single day. And we do want to use the email as a unique identifier. So in ConvertKit, we can assume that email is a unique identifier. And we do want to update existing data. So there are a few fields that we must map. One of them is the first name. So let's map first name to first name. So over here on the left side, we can see all the fields in ConvertKit. And on the right side, we can use these drop downs to map the ConvertKit fields to the Cinequeue fields. So email address is mapped to email, and Cinequeue CRN is mapped to our Cinequeue CRN fields. And we also do want to map the Cinequeue date to the temp date 01. That's the field that we're using in our video. And Cinequeue trigger is another important one, and we are going to map it to the Cinequeue camp trigger. And let's go over to the push side. The target type is going to be tag. Now we do need to get the target ID. That might be a little bit tricky. So let's go over to ConvertKit, click on subscribers. And over here on the bottom, that's where we can see tags. Now we do have a few tags in here, and this is the one that we're going to use. Your setup might be different, but the key thing in here is up in the URL where you see subscribable IDs. That's where you can find the tag target ID or tag ID. So we just need to copy it and paste it in here. We are going to save this as a preset. So ConvertKit push is the preset, but if you want to save it as a separate preset, then you would enable this save as preset. So Cinequeue field CRN is going to be pushed to the Cinequeue CRN ConvertKit field. So on the push side, the field mapping works exactly the same as on the get member data side, but it's obviously the other way around. We're mapping the Cinequeue fields to the ConvertKit fields. So personalized URL is going to go to the Cinequeue PURL. So that's one of the custom fields that we created in ConvertKit. And the campaign ID is going to be mapped to the Cinequeue campaign ID. We can obviously create additional custom fields if needed. In Cinequeue, it's not going to create custom fields in ConvertKit. So we can now click Save. And we have this integration set up. So what we need to do now is we need to go back to our campaign, and under executions, we need to click on add. So this is where we can make sure that when this campaign runs, then we want the executed file, so the personalized URLs, to be transferred to ConvertKit. So this is, once you set up an integration, then those integrations are available over here on the campaign window. So now that our integration is set up, we just need to make sure that it is set up correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this campaign Cinequeue campaign ID from the URL, go over to ConvertKit, click on automations, and click on the trigger itself, and make sure that the Cinequeue campaign ID changes to, and this is where we will need to make sure that it is set up correctly. And the next thing we need to do is create a new subscriber to test our end-to-end closed loop integration. So click on add subscriber, add a single subscriber. Click on save. We have our new subscriber created, but we need to go back into it and edit some of the additional custom fields that we created. So what we want to do is we want to set the Cinequeue CRN to a value that we don't currently have in Cinequeue. And we do want a date. Now the date is quite tricky in ConvertKit because when you create a custom field, you can't actually specify the field type. So I strongly suggest that you use the year, month, day format. The integration is intelligent enough to be able to interpret multiple date types, but to be on the safe side, it's best to use the following format: year dash, let's say 08-01. So that will be a theoretical renewal date on the personalized video. And the Cinequeue trigger, okay, this value needs to be set to what we have in Cinequeue under the segment criteria. So let's just copy this value over to the Cinequeue trigger, and click on update subscriber. And because we don't currently have, so under automations in ConvertKit, you can click on rules, and you can create a rule programmatically that will call the Cinequeue webhook, but we don't currently have that set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to manually run the integration by clicking on the integrations and click on the settings, go to get member data, and that's where we have the webhook URL. But what we're going to do now is click on the run now button, and that will pull the data from ConvertKit into Cinequeue. So if we go over to members and we search for ID 75, we can see that our record has already been pulled from ConvertKit. And what we can also expect is, because this particular record has the send me ConvertKit demo in the Cinequeue camp trigger, which is triggering that campaign that we set up, we can expect that campaign to kick off, or it might have already kicked off. So let's go to executions. It has already kicked off and it already executed. And if we click on that icon, the ConvertKit timeline icon, then we can see the API call. We can see that this particular record CRN75 went through this campaign, and we have the personalized URL in here, which is what we expect to see in ConvertKit, so we're going to go over shortly and check it. And we can also check for errors in here, but there are no errors in here, so that's all good. So let's go over to ConvertKit and click on subscribers. And that's the one that we are interested in. And if we look at the Cinequeue campaign ID, that has been populated, so that's great, as well as the Cinequeue personalized URL. What it means is that this particular subscriber is now going through the Send Cinequeue demo automation. Because the automation in ConvertKit is not instant, it says after 1 hour, so send this email after 1 hour. We're not going to be able to immediately check if the closed loop integration has been set up correctly, so we'll come back to it once we receive the email. So an hour has passed and we can go over to our email. We can see that this email has been delivered, and when we click on the image, which has the personalized URL behind it, then we can see that the system takes us to a Cinequeue landing page where we can see the personalized video. It has been addressed to the correct person, and the renewal date is also displayed correctly. And when we click on the button, it takes us to the Cinequeue landing page. So our closed loop integration between ConvertKit and Cinequeue has worked as planned. And if you have any questions, please let us know via cine-q.com. Thank you for watching.